Ravenshoe, a once thriving timber town, hit on hard times after the federal government effectively killed off the timber industry when it listed the rainforests of the area under World Heritage Protection in 1987. Many predicted the township on the southwestern edge of the Atherton tablelands would die with the timber industry. But its people are as resilient as rainforest timber. They're fighting back through tourism. And there's one attraction epitomising the never-say-die spirit of the townspeople, which is right on track. The historic steam railway is the result of a lot of long hours and a lot of hard work by a small but enthusiastic band of volunteers.
Yeah, well, we're hoping that it grows into a bigger business. The story was in 1987 we all went World Heritage here and we're waiting for the tourists to come. I'm a redundant timber cutter and we're hoping to make this a viable enterprise where we can have some more jobs and people can...
Walter Dixon was a natural choice to work on restoring the D-17 tank engine, originally built in Ipswich in 1925. 6 years earlier, he'd restored this Ruston Proctor steam-powered engine.
I salvaged it from a sawmill site about 8 miles from Ravenshoe here. Restored it about 8 years ago. And with my knowledge of having done that, the people with the train approached me and asked me would I assist them with the restoration of the locomotive and all.
The Loco is unique, rescued from a park at Capella in central Queensland by steam enthusiast Roger Perry Keane, a former commercial pilot.
It's the only one running in the world. We've modified it. We've taken the tanks off the side. We carried the water in a water gin behind. And that was because the axle weight was too much for the line.
And how much went into restoring it? What had to be done?
Oh, lots and lots and lots of work. Probably well over 2,000 hours, but we did it in record time. We did it in 8 months, which is definitely a world record for restoring a steam motor.
If it wasn't for the historic steam railway, the 7 kilometres of track between Ravenshoe and Toomoolin would have been long gone, according to Railway Association Secretary David Ryder.
The railways have still got ideas about ripping up some of it, but now it's all listed by the National Trust. We hope that won't happen.
So while there's an interest in travelling on this line, its security is assured?
Reasonably, yes. I wouldn't say totally, but certainly, yeah.
There's a bit of history to the line too, isn't there?
Yeah. It was constructed in stages, first to Herberton, but it reached Herberton in 1910. Then it was extended to Toomoolin. It reached Toomoolin, I think, in about 1915. And finally it was extended into Ravenshoe, which was in the early 20s. This 7 kilometres that we're presently running along is actually the final stage that was built.
So it'd be a great shame if it was to be lost.
Oh, it'd be terrible. It's a beautiful railway line in first-class condition all along. It hasn't required a great deal of restoration for us to start running on this end, and the whole line's really in quite good order.
Ravenshoe Historic Steam Railway has been operating on the short stretch of track between Ravenshoe and Toomoolin for just on 2 years. It hasn't been a steaming success, but it is gradually becoming more well known, and the volunteer committee is now looking at extending operations to include another restored steam engine running between Atherton and Herberton.
We're hoping to start off soon running between Herberton and Atherton, which is 22 kilometres. It's quite a big undertaking for a group of volunteers like us to take on something like that, and we certainly need more interest from Atherton and Herberton people because it's a bit beyond us to run this end and that end of the line. But it's a very spectacular trip up the Herberton Range, and if it gets going, it'll be very popular, I think, because you've not only got the attraction of a steam train pulling the train, but you've got an incredibly spectacular line cut into the side of cliffs and winding its way around past waterfalls, and with big views out one side and spectacular cuttings as you go. It's not quite the Kuranda Range, but it's not far off it.
The work is hard and dirty. The rewards in monetary terms are non-existent. You can't help but wonder what these people see in it. But when you spend time around self-confessed steam train nuts, their enthusiasm does become infectious. Most involved in the Ravenshoe Historic Steam Railway have harboured a love for steam engines for as long as they can remember. So where did your love for trains start?
I think it probably started with my father. He was in steam, not a railway man, but he was with Vickers Armstrong, and they designed one of the very first steam buses that were ever made.
Oh, I've always had it, ever since I was this high.
So what's so good about steam trains?
The train itself's more like a human being, really, particularly from the driver's point of view. You treat it right, it'll treat you right, and it really does respond to the way you handle it. It's very, very different to diesel or an electric in that way. It's far more sort of going back to the older days when maybe you were kinder to people than you are today.
These people boarding the Millstream Express were visiting North Queensland from all parts of Australia. For many, the chance to make the 1 hour run from Ravenshoe to Tamoolan and back was the prime reason for holidaying in the north.
I think they're looking for a bit of nostalgia, chiefly. Something that comes from the past, and something that's really alive now, but coming from the past. I'm sure that's what it is.
Bringing back memories was certainly the major reason given by these train buffs for travelling to Ravenshoe. Memories from days when life, like the modes of transport, moved a little slower than they do today.
We thoroughly enjoyed it. Yes, I did particularly. It's brought back many memories. Absolutely amazing of my childhood days when I lived in southwest New South Wales at a place called Merriwagga. And we'd catch mainly the freight train in steam train, sit in the dog box, and by the time we got to Griffith, we were covered in soot and ashes, you know, you couldn't see us. But it was good fun. It took about 4 hours to travel 50 miles.
So you're a train buff, eh?
Oh, yes, yes.
Is that something that's in your blood, do you think?
Well, I think it just brings back memories, you know, after, especially childhood memories of train travel, yeah. You sort of love it, makes you a bit nostalgic.
I remember when I was still in short pants, I was riding on the steam trains here, and I always remember putting the head out the window and copping an eye full of soot, you know, so...
I can remember waiting for my mother coming home from Brisbane on the old steam train.
So it brings back memories for you?
Oh, it certainly does, yes.
And do you know of many steam trains operating now that you'd like to ride on?
Yes, we have one in Victoria, Puffin Billy, which runs up through the Dandenong Ranges, very similar to this. Very exciting ride.
What's so different about travelling on a steam-powered locomotive?
Just the atmosphere. The smell of the coal, and the atmosphere is entirely different to the diesel. That's the way I see it. As a kid, I raved about them, and I'm still the same. Never grown up.
And once you get them talking about their love for locos, they're harder to stop than a runaway train.